This episode is brought to you by the Fish Sauce RPG. Unleash the power of precision. Our RPG, Rod Positioning Gadget, is the ultimate tool for adjusting Scotty or Phoebe rod holders.
No more struggles or worn-out tools, just smooth, easy adjustments. Elevate your fishing game and shop the RPG now.
www.fishsauce.com.
And now we got a huge shout out to our next sponsor, Coldwater Strong. Coldwater Strong makes high-quality gear for boat and bank anglers alike, from flasher bumpers and bank fishing leader kits to kill bags and bleed bags. Coldwater Strong has the gear to make you the hot rod in the boat or on the bank. Get your Coldwater Strong products at local fishing retailers like Bob's Sporting Goods in Longview, Anglers Unlimited, previously Angler West in Woodland, and Fisherman Marine and Outdoor. Go visit their website at www.coldwaterstrong.com. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of the Wet Net Podcast. This is Clayton. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sitting here tonight with David Pyle. You might recognize him from... I'm going to take this out, actually. You might recognize him from his YouTube channel, Fishing with David Pyle. I started watching him a handful of years ago. Super stand-up guy. And thank you so much for joining me tonight, man. How you doing?
Great, Clayton. Man, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah. This is going to be a blast. We're going to cover a handful of different topics tonight, but we're just kind of going to let the conversation flow, and we're going to have a good time. I'll try to dive into some dam counts and stuff. I don't have my laptop here in front of me today.
Cool.
I don't have my phone, obviously, because it's recording, so we're not really going to cover that today. We gave away a whole bunch of stuff last week. We're waiting for some more giveaway items to be coming in, so keep your eyes and ears open for that. And let's dive into the conversation here, man. First things first, let's get a little David Pyle introduction, man. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Cool. I probably started in fishing later in life than most folks. Went through a divorce and had my kids 7 days on and off. And my body was kind of breaking down from playing soccer and coaching soccer. So I thought, I had a good friend who was into fishing, and he took me fishing. Shinny Nakamini, great friend. Got me hooked on steelhead, so we would go out, fish from the bank, drift fishing. Sooner or later, I was taking my boat out, sitting on anchor. I just got hooked, man. Yeah. I mean, incredible, to the point where I was doing about 125 trips a year.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. And, I'm really a student of things. I just dug in. I was researching, doing everything I could to learn. And, I think all that paid off. And I had a guide that mentored me, and then several other people who mentored me along the way.
Yeah. Fishing is an excellent thing to be a student in. There's so much to learn. It's constantly evolving. Things are changing. Fisheries are changing. There's so much going on all the time. It's a great thing to be in.
I would put it this way. When I started, I wanted to learn everything I could, just wrap my arms around it. And quite frankly, hey, I'm a learner. I have a long way to go. And even to this stage where I've been doing this really hardcore for the last 15 years, and I'm still a learner. Yeah. And we'll get to some of that conversation when we talk about fishing above Selwood and my learning process with that. But, every year I pick a new zone, and I try to teach myself that zone, being an observer mostly, and then going out and try, it's trial and error. Yeah. And part of my guided education, which I do guided education trips in addition to regular guided trips, but part of that is, I'm teaching people, but I'm also, on the flip side of that, continuing to learn, and I want to be able to take people into other areas. So I'm a general practitioner. I'm not a specialist and honed into one zone. But around 2015, I started doing YouTube videos, which many people probably who are listening, tuned in, know me from that. And my whole deal was these guys who mentored me, people on the river who shared information with me. I was so grateful for that. I was like, what can I do? So I started just publishing exactly what I was using when I'm fishing. And, helping people out, and the reception has been fantastic.
Yeah.
I really don't seem to have a lot of haters out there, which is great because social media can be so...
Oh, it can be brutal, man. It can be absolutely brutal. You started this in 2015. Roughly how many followers are you at right now, or subscribers, I guess?
Oh, I don't even really pay attention to that anymore.
Yeah.
It's somewhere over 5,000 or something.
That's awesome.
It's not viral by any measure. And also, I was working full time.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my family. I've got grandkids now. I've got Tamara. I've got things in life that I need to pay attention to in addition to fishing. So, as you know, doing what you're doing on weekends, fishing as much as you can, and my job allowed me to take days off. That's how I get 145 days of fishing, right?
Mm-hmm. What was your job, if you don't mind me asking?
I worked in healthcare, and for the last 3 years, I was the interim CEO of a healthcare company. So,
really? That's awesome.
And now I'm retired.
Yeah.
So,
well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
I'm just elated to be able to now fish more and guide more. So,
well, I don't know how much it means, but you look way too young to be retired.
I still feel pretty young in some ways, but as you can see with this pillow behind my back.
Well, I'm 25 and I feel too dang old. So. I sneezed wrong the other day and tweaked my back. I don't know what that was about, but the age is coming.
That's you and me both, and I'm 7 days into that thing trying to heal.
Yeah.
So along the way, I got my guide's license about 7 years ago. So I've been guiding. Officially, this is my 6th or 7th season in guiding.
Okay.
And I kind of spawned an idea to just educate people and education fishing. So I kind of have a document which I work with, and everybody who goes on a guided education trip with me gets that document, and then I customize the trip to their needs. Everybody's at a different level. Most of these guys have boats. Almost all of them have boats, right? And some of them are struggling, some of them are intermediate, and some people are actually quite advanced.
Gotcha. So what does one of these guided education trips look like? They'll get a hold of you over a phone call or email or something, and then they'll tell you, hey, David, I would consider myself this level. I want to get to this level. How can you help me? How does that work?
Pretty much I get a phone call or a text. Hey, I'm interested in a guided education trip, or I'm interested in a guided trip, and I call them up, and I basically, if they're interested in guided education, I find that out, and I say, okay, well, where are you? How long have you owned a boat? Where do you fish? Where do you live? And then I kind of put together a plan to fish for them, specifically maybe close to where they live. Or, if there's a place that you'd like to fish, let's focus on that area. So then we'll do the actual trip, we'll do it in their zone, something that's going to be convenient for them.
Yeah. So you travel a little bit.
So I'm going to go where they want to fish. Yes.
Yeah. Is there an area that's kind of you get a good concentration of people, or are you just all over the place? I see on your videos you spend a lot of time in the Willamette River, that kind of I-5 area on the Columbia when it's open. Is that kind of like your main area?
I've mainly focused from Selwood down to the head of the channel, even down the channel. In the Columbia, I'll go down as far as St. Helens. If we're in the Columbia, I'll go up as high as Hood River. So I'm jumping all over the place. And quite frankly, like I said, I'm a general practitioner guy. I don't have one specific area where I'm the absolute expert.
Yeah.
But, I have friends in all of those zones, and those friends are my network.
Right. And
if I need advice or I need to know what it takes to catch fish there, I have people to go to. And quite frankly, I've fished these zones for many years now, or it seems like many years, And so I do have a good level of fishing expertise, and I have a lot to teach people. So
that's awesome. And the fact that you're willing to teach is awesome too. There's a lot of guys that have a lot to teach, but they want to keep it to themselves,
Exactly.
And that's part of what I'm trying to break with this podcast also, is finding people who are willing to share information. I'm trying to get guides. I'm trying to get social media influencers, YouTube, so on and so forth, which you're kind of both. And then, product manufacturers, because the way I see it, if somebody's going to know how to fish a product, it's probably going to be the person who makes it,
Correct. Yeah.
So trying to spread information as much as I can, because there's so much secrecy in fishing. I don't understand it a lot of times. There's some fisheries that are obviously you kind of have to, or else they're going to get blown up.
Yeah.
And sharing as much information as you reasonably can. That's what I'm about with doing this. So.
Yeah, and there's a level of I have to be respectable to people in my network.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there's some kind of lines where, hey, I can't divulge everything. And for me, I'm willing to tell people everything that I do, that I experience. So if somebody says, hey, fishing is good in this zone, I go to that zone, I catch a fish, I'm happy to share what I caught it on, everything.
Right.
But if I get third-hand information, hey, I caught 6 fish in this zone, we went 6 for 9 yesterday, blah, 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 then I don't take that information and share it with the masses, because it's not mine to share.
Right. Yeah.
But that might mean I go there and I film, and everybody knows, all of my network knows, hey, I might come into their zone per se and fish, and that might not necessarily be a total positive for them, because it might bring a few more people into the zone. Mm-hmm. But then again, in fishing, words travels really fast anyway. So by the time my videos get there, maybe it's not. It's kind of
irrelevant,
a non-event. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm respectful, and also like anchor fishing or something, I wouldn't go into an anchor spot and then video in somebody's anchor spot and go, this is the greatest place on the planet. That to me is information I'm not going to bring a whole bunch of people into an anchor spot, somebody's secret spot.
Yeah.
So I think people should be able to hold on to some of their secrets, but I'm willing to share everything I experience, and I'm willing to share it with anybody. If they come by me in a boat and they go, hey, David, I just saw you catch fish, and I say, hey, I'm 23 on the line counter, 16-ounce lead, pro troll with a 16-inch leader. Yeah. And I'm more than happy to share that, because hey, if you guys can get a fish, you're going to make my day getting a fish, because I just helped you. That's totally cool.
Well, and that's one thing that also really drew me to your videos when I started watching them, is at the end of every video you do, you explain what you used, what worked for you, and just having that transparency is huge.
Yeah, and and I think maybe through social media, maybe that's why people are a little more accepting of me, and not just totally trashing me and flaming me on social media, because I'm kind of a harmless guy out there. I just say, hey, I'm fishing and I want to help people. Yeah. And if you do good, it comes back to you in spades. And quite frankly, even my guided education trips, some of the folks that I've taken out have actually turned around and taught me things. Yeah. And I get reports. They go out and fish, they get a fish, and they're going, oh, God, thank you, David, I got a fish today. Matter of fact, I got one today. They went out into St. John's, and they caught a fish on a coon shrimp, and I said, good job, you guys are awesome. And they were like going, well, we have thanks to you for that. Yeah. Well, they're doing that on their own, quite frankly. I might have played a little part in that, and that feels good, but they're motivated. They're doing it. They're going out and testing things. It's just totally awesome.
Yeah, that's super cool. The first time, well, I'm actually going to backtrack here just a couple days ago. My buddy Adam had reached out to me and told me, he said, how would you feel about having David Pyle on the show? And you and I had bumped into each other once prior at it was a couple sturgeon seasons ago, upriver there at the Hood River boat launch, when we had all that ice, and man, I can't even, it was just barely in the double digits for temperature, and the ramp was frozen, and I had gone fishing the night prior and put the boat on the trailer, went and stayed at the hotel, woke up the next morning ready to fish. I try to launch my boat, and I had my fiance sitting in the pickup, and my boat froze to the trailer. And I'm hollering at my lady. I'm like, hey, can you back me up like 5 more feet? And she's like, no, I'm not doing that. It's ice. And I see you standing up at the top of the ramp, and I recognized you from YouTube videos. I hollered at, hey, David, can you give me a hand really quick? And you obviously more than willing. You backed my boat down a couple more feet, and I was able to get the boat off the trailer, and we went and enjoyed a day of fishing. And that just a testament to the kind of person that you are. And I urge people to get a hold of you and try to, get these guided education trips, because you have a lot to offer, not just from a knowledge standpoint, but also just being a good person.
I appreciate that. And when you and I talked on the phone and you said, hey, you might remember this 2 years ago at the boat ramp up at Hood River, I immediately knew. I was like, God, that's just an unforgettable moment. Dirk and I had showed up. The ramp was just covered in ice because, I don't know, 2 or 3 boats had dumped their boats in their trailer, going up, all the water split on it. It was terrible. And I was sitting at the top of the ramp wondering if I should back down. You were the courageous guy. I was like, man, if he's going to do it, all right, I'm going to watch him.
Yeah. I was just a dummy with a cheap truck and a cheap boat. I didn't have a whole lot to lose.
Hey, you were the canary in the coal mine. I said, if he's going to do it, and then I pulled your truck back up to the top of the ramp, and I was like, gosh, I think I can do that with my 4Runner, you know, and I had all-weather tires, but nothing near what your truck. But it gave me the confidence, and otherwise I would have been sitting at the top of that ramp for a few more hours.
Yeah.
So that was cool. It was a win-win all the way around.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. That's awesome. So what have you been up to recently? We're in the heart of our 2024 spring Chinook season. Obviously, Main Stem Columbia is closed. What have you been up to?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of guided education trips, and it's been a tough year. It's really, some of my days I did trips, guided education in the Willamette, because my customers wanted to know certain portions of the Willamette, Selwood area, or whatever it was, and the Columbia was open. And, rightfully, it would have been better for me to be in the Columbia during those days, so I missed a few days in the Columbia, but that's what my customers want. So that's where I'm at. Yeah. And I did get out there on that last day and got a couple fish. So it was like, I need to get something out of this Columbia River, right?
Yeah.
And then, I've worked the Selwood area. I've moved up to West Lynn the last year and a half. So, as I said, being a student of fishing, I've been in a real big observation mode and going out and testing in the Oregon City, even down Lake Oswego, Oregon City, Selwood, above Selwood, Milwaukee areas. And it's interesting. Everything above Selwood Bridge starts to be a lot of forward bouncing. So basically 3-ounce lead, long leader, throw a sand shrimp on it, and bounce.
Gotcha.
You can find that all the way up to Oregon City. And then once you get up near Oregon City, you start to have, for a portion of this season, back bouncing, or back trolling, let's say. Back trolling and back bouncing. Yeah. So the back trolling using divers and long leaders and sand shrimp and eggs. And then you pull up further up above the bridge, and right now there's pro trolling going on up there on the slack tide. And there's guys that are up there that they're jigging. So there's boats just sitting there hovering, and they're jigging. So you have back bouncing, back trolling, forward trolling.
So many different options for success right there.
Yeah, it's really cool, all the things you can do up in Oregon City. It really is neat. And for a few years, it's like, that's been my next, I got to learn these areas. Yeah. And so now I'm about a year and a half in. I did a couple guided trips up there last year and had really good success pro trolling after all the the back trolling ended, because it is temperature sensitive, and once the temperature gets to a certain point, then when you're back trolling, you've got chub in there eating your eggs, and so that thing just all peters out.
What is kind of that temperature that they start to peter off at?
You know, I don't know the exact temperature, but it's probably in the high 50s.
Okay. So we're coming up on it relatively quick.
Yeah, it's a pretty short-lived, and in addition to that, there's a flow issue. If the flow of water, if we don't have enough flow, then you really can't back troll through there.
Yeah.
So, not being an expert at it, but I can tell you that Mikey from Mikey's Fishing Adventures, good friend of mine, kind of mentored me over the last 3 seasons, and I go up there on his boat and did some back trolling. He showed me how to rig eggs and sand shrimp. And then this year, Dirk and I went up there, just released a video yesterday. Dirk and I went up there, first time I had just tried it on my boat, and wham, we got a fish. So it was like, yes, you know, you study something and you get some really good advice, and Mikey just gave me the total rundown on leader length and hook size and how to rig a sand shrimp, and eggs. And,
that's awesome.
And it's, as I understand it, very finicky up there when it comes to eggs, and those people that know how to get their eggs hot or put the right sauce on it. It's a very delicate balance, and those people that are up there that are really good know how to do all that, and they catch a lot of fish.
Yeah. So do you cure a lot of your own eggs, I assume?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Do you kind of do something pretty basic, or do you like to get into it pretty hard with? I'm
really basic because I don't use eggs that much, you know, until this season. I started doing this, right? Yeah. So, so I'm just using a basic sauce from Fisherman's. Yeah. Nothing special.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
It's awesome knowing that you can go do something basic and still find success, though. Because I know myself personally. I'm new to egg fishing. I just started doing it. You know, I would say hover fishing in the fall last year is really the first exposure I'd had to fishing eggs, and it can be really intimidating when you're brand new to it, and you're like, oh man, you kill a fall fish and it's got a skein of eggs in it, and a couple of skeins of eggs in it, and I'm like, man, I don't even know what to do with these. I ruined probably my first 4 batches just by inexperience and not knowing what I'm doing. You know, you can watch all the YouTube videos in the world and still screw up some eggs. So.
And that's where it helps to have somebody like Mikey, and I can call him and say, hey, you know, help me with these eggs. What cure should I use? And again, you know, Mikey is one example, but I've got people all throughout the system that are willing to help me, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so, you know, although I'm helping people in areas where I have expertise, I have people helping me, and you know, that's a really cool part of fishing.
Yeah.
And people are willing to help you. Like, hey, you know, help me with this, you know. And so I call these people my mentors, and in some ways we're peers, in some ways we're mentors. I have expertise in some areas, and they call me and ask me questions, and vice versa. And
you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That's how it should be.
Yeah, you can't know everything,
right?
And I'm never going to know everything as much as a general practitioner as I am. I would say I'm not a pure expert in any one of these areas.
The jack of all trades, master of none. That's what they say.
But you know, it's kind of crazy because I'll do really well in one area, and then I kind of like go, well, I can stay here and keep fishing, but I have that desire to go move and say, hey, now I got to prove it that I can do it in another area. And so I've continued to kind of expand my reach. And you know, one year I'm at Swan Island, one year I'm working the head of the channel, the next year I'm down at Coon Island, Santosh, and you know, and now here I am. Well, I mean, I've spent several years up in Selwood fishing the Selwood, Willamette Park, going down to Ross Island, Hawthorne Bridge, OMSI, and understanding all those areas. And that just allows me, if fishing is crap in one area, then I've got some other places to go.
Right. So with you doing this as long as you have, and you reaching out and exploring these different, you know, styles of fishing, you know, back trolling, back bouncing, pro trolls, obviously triangle and herring. If you were to give like a general, like, this is my niche, this is what I do best, what would you say your niche is?
Yeah, as a general practitioner, I'm a jack of all trades. Certainly, it's certainly trolling, triangles and back trolling. Finding zones where there's good flow and I can get to the bottom with triangles and herring.
Yeah.
I mean, I love doing that. I love that. I love that fishing style. Pro trolls, using them when they're appropriate.
Yeah.
And I listened to your interview with Swanson and Dar, and incredible guys. They had a whole lot to say.
Yeah, they're great dudes.
Yeah,
awesome dudes.
One thing I would add to your talk with them is like, when do you pull out 360s and start using them? In really wasn't discussed too much about the purpose, and when I think about 360s, I'm thinking about temperature, number one. When I get to a certain temperature, I can start trolling faster.
Right.
And triangles are really, really good and super slow trolling when you're grinding the bottom.
When the water's really cold and fish are kind of lethargic and
and so there's a temperature point where you can roll out those flashers. And there's also different flashers. There are different 360s that, like right now, I'd be using short bus flashers. They have a double wing on them.
Yeah.
I control them slower and they'll still roll. They'll still get a perfectly good roll. Once we get to a little faster trolling, then I tend to use pro troll flashers. I just like them better. I catch more fish on them.
Right.
That's, doesn't mean they're better. Just my personal
preference.
That's my personal way, what works for me. And so the purpose, understanding that flasher is really good at bringing fish up.
Right.
So, if we're going to fish in St. John's area, then right now that's a good tool, because deep water, deep stagnant water, you control faster there because you don't have current. Now, if you took a 360 flasher and you tried to go down the channel with it,
you go up to Coon Island where you're looking at 13 to 14 feet and you got a big 360 doing a 3-foot circle.
And you know what, you might very well do fantastic.
I'm sure people do,
right?
Yeah,
but a triangle is the better tool in general,
right?
And then because if you're on an outgoing tide and you have to go so fast to get that thing to roll, you're smoking by fish, and that's not the best tool in my mind.
Right.
But we're starting to roll all that hardware out a little earlier every year. In the old days, for me, it used to be 60 degrees that we'd switch over to spinners, and this was pre-Pro Troll days.
Right.
And so now we're starting to see hardware rolled out at 52, 53 degrees, and some people are even probably breaking it out in the 40s.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I've seen a handful of pictures on Facebook of gentlemen doing 360s and super baits and having some success. Now, I'm a firm believer as a weekend warrior. I get 2 days a week to try to get fish. I'm going to fish traditionally what is kind of the safest option, right? Which earlier in the season, you get that, kind of late part of February. I try really hard to get a February spinner or February springer every year. Haven't done it yet. My earliest fish was March 5th, but
that's my birthday.
Oh, that's
job.
awesome. Thanks, man. Anyways, from that late part of February to, I don't know, I'm going to say the same thing Josiah said. When more guys are catching pro trolls than I am on triangles and herring,
that's the time.
That's what I'm going to swap over.
Yeah.
So that early part, I'm going to do triangles and herring, triangles and anchovies. Just whatever I feel is the safest bet.
Yeah, and I think there is a place to put your 360 and even hardware, because in the old days, in the early spring, we'd be sitting on anchor, right, and we'd have a plug down there, a quick fish, right. So if you're going uphill into the current, which is what most people are doing in early February, at least on the Willamette, we're talking, Willamette River, you're going to find 15 feet of water, and you're going to troll into the current super slow because the fish are lethargic, and you're going to give them a long time to look at your gear and hopefully take it.
Right.
Maybe a spin fish is appropriate because it's not that much different than a plug sitting there, and it's not moving very fast.
Yeah.
Because you're nosing into the current going 0.25 miles an hour, and even you might be up at Selwood on that shelf sitting there, just maybe you're even hovering.
Yeah.
So
I don't think I've ever really fished a Willamette in that late February, early March. Usually I'll do like in the channel, and that's kind of a big, triangles and herring show, that time of year. So kind of the philosophy that you had just talked about was nosing into the current, trolling really slow, and, slowing down that presentation. I've also heard kind of an argument that, say for example, you're driving down I-5, right? When you're trolling downhill, essentially those fish are trolling, with the current. You're going to see more headlights if you're driving on the wrong side of the road. You know what I mean? So it's where do you kind of weigh those options versus, do I want to troll really slow and maybe find one, or do I want to troll a little quicker? And I mean, I shouldn't say a little quicker. Do I want to troll with the current or against it? Because am I going to put it in front of more fish that way? You get that?
So absolutely. And I would say there is a point in fishing where you're covering water.
Right.
And if you're sitting in one spot, you might as well be anchored.
Right.
Now, a lot of the early fishing is done on anchor.
Mm-hmm.
And we know a lot of times where those early fish lay, where they hold, right?
Yeah.
So
finding their travel lanes and knowing those travel lanes.
So the early folks, when I get out and I start running my patterns early in the spring and February, I'm watching old timers that come out every year in February, and I'm watching their patterns, how they're fishing, where they're fishing, and that's what I observe.
Right.
So I'm going to say it's got to work, because these guys aren't out there wasting their time for 30 days until a fish shows up in, March 5th.
Right. I always like to say I'm a monkey see, monkey do kind of guy. Yeah. I'm going to follow the people who know better. And it almost sounds like you're a professional monkey see, monkey do kind of guy. As an observer, that's what you got to do. I
am just hell bent on paying attention to, and I know who to pay attention to.
Yeah.
So when I go up on the shelf in Selwood, I'm watching the Sultan.
Yeah, the Sultan of Selwood.
And I'm talking to him too. But, I'm observing what he's doing, and I'm going, hey, I can mimic that. I can do that. I can do that exact same thing. Mm-hmm. When I go down to Coon Island and I'm watching the folks that moor right there.
Yeah, You're watching Josiah Dar. You're watching guys like Eric Swanson and the people who do it.
Josiah's dad.
Yeah.
And those guys, the old timers, I'm watching what they do, and we can all do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
People can come out and watch me if they want, but I mean, for whatever that's worth. But certainly that getting out early and watching those early folks that know what they're doing, and they're like the experts of their spot, pays dividends.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So observation is worth a lot.
Yeah.
And, you can see they pull their gear up. You're looking at it and go, how much lead are they using? What's the leader length? What, are they using flashers here, or are they just bouncing lead? And like I said, if you go Selwood, you can find a lot of people working these little ledges above Selwood all the way up to Oregon City, just 20 feet, 18 feet deep, and they're forward trolling. There's barely creeping forward, even to this point, not just to February, and they're bouncing.
Yeah,
they're just bouncing with a naked, whatever it is, sand shrimp, coon shrimp, or a prawn,
right,
or a cut plug herring, and those are the guys that quietly catch fish.
Yeah,
they quietly catch fish now.
They're not posting them on Facebook and
right. I'm not going to come flying through there in a guide boat and with all my flashers and everything else. And I'm not, that's not the kind of thing where I would take a guided trip through, because it's a little more intimate setting for, hey, I've got a small sled. I can go there, and I got my swivel chair, and I can bounce.
Yeah.
And then you have what's called a dummy rod, a second rod that might be running with a diver.
Right.
And that's a little bit suspended. It's kept off the bottom. But your main deal is just bouncing that little 3-ounce lead off the bottom and waiting for a fish to come around and knock it off. So being an observer, everybody can do this.
Yeah.
It's hey. That's one thing I talk to everybody about when I do a guided education trip. It's like, hey, learn from observation, get out early, run some patterns, discover where the snags are.
Yeah.
Discover who the people are that really know how to fish, because those guys that are willing to be out there in early February, they're going to be out in that same hole for the whole season. They own it. They're the experts of the area.
Right. Yeah, and people are always so quick to pass judgment too. In terms of being an observer, they would look at somebody and say, "Man, I can't believe he's doing that. Why is he doing that? I would rather be doing this." Well, you don't always know best. People just need. I don't know. I feel like there's a certain time and a place where people just need to say, "You know what? I'm going to see what he's doing, and I'm going to try to mimic it. I'm going to learn how to do it."
Yeah. Well, I'm respectful to all those folks, and I feel like they deserve their due. They've managed to become experts at this, and they quietly go fish these little edges, and they catch a lot of fish, and I totally respect that. That's totally awesome that you guys are willing to do that and become experts at it.
Yeah.
And then they might later on come down river and fish St. John's later, and they might be asking questions to somebody like the Underdog, who's down there all the time, who's again a mentor of mine.
Yeah.
And when I started fishing, way back when I was mooring at Fred's Marina, he took me under his wing and told me how to troll and what to use, and hey, here's the trolling pattern. And to this day, we talk at least 3-4 times a week, and hey, what's going on down there? And I tell him what's going on, and what I see, and it's great to have that connection, that network, and those people. But I kind of maybe took a few years in Selwood, and I still kind of feel like that's a little bit of my home base.
Yeah.
So if going back to your question, where do I see myself? The kind of fisherman, I'm kind of a Selwood guy. I really like that zone from below the Selwood Bridge mostly.
Yeah.
And I like Ross Island. I like Hawthorne. Hawthorne is a little more snaggy and challenging, but there's fish to be caught in all of the zones. And if the spaghetti factory stretch is just bonkers busy, I have other places to go there.
Right. Generally speaking, the first springer or 2 or 3 that you're going to hear caught in the Willamette River is going to be up in that Selwood area, and I can't for the life of me figure out why is it Selwood? Is it just because it's targeted harder? Or, because you have all the way from the head of the channel or all the way up to St. Helens there where the Multnomah Channel starts for those fish to be caught. Why do you think that they're making it that far before they're getting caught?
Well, interesting enough, like at the beginning of every springer season in February or March, I start writing a newsletter out to everybody that's been on my guided education trips, and I tell them, the 3 spots to really look at is down in the channel, Selwood, 4 spots, Selwood, up in Oregon City, or lost my train of thought there. St. John's at the head of the channel. So the head of the channel. Those spots tend to be where the early fish get caught. They're kind of the fish hold there.
Right.
So every year it's either Selwood or it's the head of the channel or it's lower channel or Meldrum up there that one of the first fish gets caught. So I'm going to one day get out there early and we catch the first fish. Believe it or not.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now that I'm retired, I actually will have weekdays to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's like Keith Archer. I had Keith Archer on, and he had made a really good point, saying that the areas that hold fish, you're going to have an easier time getting them to bite versus a traveling fish. So you get those areas like Coon Island or St. John's or Selwood or anything like that is going to actively hold fish. It's easier to get them to bite them when they're trafficking.
Absolutely. So, that's why I wouldn't be fishing, say, the industrial area. Gunderson, or we used to call it's some other name company now, but Gunderson right down there across from Swan Island, in those areas, I wouldn't necessarily be fishing that in the super early season.
Right.
But, come March or April, certainly I'd be fishing, that zone Fremont down to Swan Island, I mean, there's just so many good places to go. If it's not working for me in one place, then I go another. And I spent a lot of time in Swan Island, that troll underneath the University of Portland. I spent a lot of time that stretch of Gunderson up Fremont Bridge all the way down to Gunderson through those I don't know what you call that mid basin area. So
I'm not super familiar with that up
there.
Pretty much from St. John's up. Okay. I'm not super familiar with, because I live up in Longview. Yeah. So I don't target that area a lot. But
that's and you know, that's a really, for beginning fishermen, those spots are really good because it's mostly deep water trolling, and that's a really relaxing day.
Oh yeah.
Now you start moving up. You start fishing Selwood Zone, and we're targeting areas where you can grind the bottom. And on a snaggy river, that's like going down in the channel too. Yeah. You're gonna be, so the velocity of water going through the channel is a lot faster than the velocity of water in St. John's.
Right.
And you know, that 50 feet of water, 45 feet of water, you're not going to go to the bottom. You're going to be fishing at suspended fishing. You're trolling around. You know, you've got. In this case, today with water temperatures, we use some 360 flashers, hopefully bring a fish up and get it to snap. And certainly there are a couple areas to grind the bottom at the head of the channel as well. But, you know, I do like those deep water trolls because they're relaxing.
Yeah, yeah. So are you able to keep them suspended on those deep water trolls even with a pretty decent outgoing tide? Or with that outgoing tide, will you kind of hug them down a little deeper?
In that section, let's say from the Steel Bridge all the way down to St. John's, almost to the head of the channel area, typically the water is more stagnant.
Right.
When the Columbia rises, that becomes a big lake, and it doesn't move. So you can pro troll that. There's no reason to go to the bottom ever.
Gotcha.
Right. You might cheat out in some spots like Gunderson where it gets 17 feet deep, and you might drag your gear along the bottom there. Yeah. But in that whole section, it's mostly your deep water trolling, and it's really nice and easy. You know, just you could even sit up your steering wheel and drive around till you hear a zip zip on the back line.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. So today is what, April 29th? 29th?
Yeah.
I believe so, yeah. Up to this point, kind of a generalized report for the Willamette River. You said it's been kind of tough.
I think we had about 2 weeks ago, we had it kind of popped in multiple places. And of course, you know, some areas down in the lower channel, which I would be expecting right now to see 30 fish days down there, or at least some parts of April to have some days. And that I don't believe has happened. Yeah. It's been super, super thin. You know, back trolling up in Oregon City is decent some days, but I don't think it's popped to the point where you're just going, man, it's lights out there. Everybody's got to get up there and fish it. Yeah. And I don't think Selwood is produced either. So most of the people I talk to are like, hey, you know, I saw 5 or 10 fish caught. I think I was down at the head of the channel one day, and maybe we saw 14 or 15 caught in that. We're like going, wow, now that's getting where we'd like to see it.
That's getting better.
Because if we see that many, then there are probably 20, 25 caught. Yeah. But those days are far and few between this season. It's been rather tough.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure the concentration of boats is bound to blow up here a little bit. I'm sure you heard that the end of the day today, everything above Bonneville is closed on the main stem too. So that's gonna push a lot of those guys that are fishing further upriver our way. They'll be hitting Drano, Wind River. They'll be coming into the Multnomah Channel. They'll be coming into the Willamette River. You know, it's gonna push people around. So hopefully there will be more guys finding fish. You know, I mean, kind of helping build a better report, I guess. But yeah, it's. I got a feeling it's going to get pretty busy wherever you go.
Yeah, and trend we've seen over the past 10, 15 years, the fish come later, and there's parts of the Willamette River that can fish all the way into July, believe it or not. Yeah. and that, you know, years ago when I was really cutting my teeth, I'd be out July 7th pulling herring around because I didn't like spinners.
Yeah.
and I would catch fish, right?
Yeah.
I would catch fish. So you can pull bait, triangle flashers and bait quite late and still catch fish. But everybody at that point gave up. There was a good steelhead fishery at that time too, so people weren't really investigating how long do these fish continue to come up the Willamette, mill around at the mouth of the Willamette, mixture of summers and possibly Willamette River bound, late springers going upriver.
Right.
And so the fact that we don't have that Columbia River steelhead run, I mean, in July, generally I was like going, hey, it's time to go up to Camas, sit at marker 50. People will go down to Longview and sit there and steelhead fish, and that's just dried up.
Right.
So it forced people to look a little harder at maybe late springers or an early mixture of Columbia River fish that might come into the mouth of the Willamette.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that time of year, a lot of the guys will go out and they'll start doing ocean stuff, because the ocean seasons are open, and there's
halibut,
a lot.
There's halibut going, and maybe even some early tuna. Then things do kind of disperse, but and then of course, you get into August and everybody's down in boot tent.
Oh yeah.
and then you get September and everybody's flipping right back up here and kind of hopscotching their way upriver. So
yeah. You and I, we had talked on the phone previous to this, and I told you, I picked up my first LiveScope unit yesterday, and you had told me that you'd been toying around with it. Let's dive into some of the electronic side of things.
Awesome. Yeah.
So I got the Garmin, the LVS 32, which I believe is a little older unit than you have the LVS 34. Right. How long have you had your unit?
I put it in this winter.
Okay.
So,
so you're still in the learning side of things.
Yeah, I'm new, and I've got a buddy Dan who he is so glued to that thing. I would call him. He's got to be one of the most expert people at viewing and using it. So I have that guidance, which is awesome.
Right.
And originally met Dan, taking him out on a guided education trip, and here he is educating me. And I went out with him yesterday, and we'll get back to that story, but let's continue on. Anyway, I've got another friend who, Daryl from Fish DR, he's a guide. He's just got phenomenal knowledge on installation and understanding how much voltage you have to have and how the wires should be placed. And he actually had a transom mount that he shared with me that is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I mean, I motored up to 25 miles an hour the other day and left my LiveScope down.
Oh man.
And guess what? I looked back and I was like, oh my gosh, my LiveScope's down.
Oh man.
It totally survived. It's bulletproof.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But he does a lot of ocean fishing, and he trolls fast for tuna. He's like, he does some unique things out there. So he
has got to be able to withstand that.
Yeah. And so, fortunately, here's another guy that I took out on a guided education trip, and he's a longtime fisherman. So people that go out with me don't necessarily have to be rookies. You see somebody in my boat, don't just assume that he had a long experience of ocean fishing and fished out of Hawaii, fished out of the East Coast.
Right.
A lot of ocean fishing. So he's using that to not only find salmon when he's salmon fishing in the river here, but to find halibut and tuna. And I think some of his strategies and his logic are really spot on. I'm like going, man, I'm so impressed with Daryl's knowledge.
Yeah.
And he's a great guy. And man, I mean, people should call him up and go ocean fishing with him because he kills it out there.
Yeah, so, that's awesome.
And then back to Dan. Dan, I just went out with Dan yesterday, and he was like, David, you got to get LiveScope. You got to get it. And every time I see him on the river, his just eyes are glued to his screen, and I'm like going, you need to drive your boat. Anyway, so yesterday he was basically schooling me on what I needed to look for to identify what does a fish look like on this, right? Because I use the tool in another way mostly, which I'll discuss, but sure enough, we see a fish down there on the bottom, 32, 34 feet of water. And he's like, Dave, there's a fish right there. And I go, oh, yeah, I see it. It's just a little white dot. Doesn't look like much, right?
Right.
He identified it as a fish. And he drops his gear down about 5 feet above where that fish is going to be. And we're trolling into the current. So we're barely creeping along. And sure enough, that fish saw his gear, and we watched it in a LiveScope, went up, investigated it, and we looked up over the back of the boat, and the rod was dancing.
Oh man, that's awesome.
That was just so incredibly cool.
Yeah.
And then the way I use it mostly, which to date how I've used it is, I can tell my customers, hey, when you're dropping your line down, I want you to look at that screen, and you watch your gear get down to the bottom.
Right.
And of course, this is where, I'm working in an area where there's current, and we're working the bottom. So they can drop their gear down, and I go, okay, you see right there, you're coasting right above the bottom, exactly where you want to be. Now, what's your line counter? And they tell me line counter. Okay, then I can tell everybody else in the boat, set your line counters.
Yeah.
So using equal equipment in my boat so that everything is consistent.
Yeah.
With one rod on the LiveScope, I can basically figure out exactly where everybody should be.
Right.
In addition to that, there's sometimes when you might be at a very constant speed trolling and you see that your gear is now rising off the bottom.
Yeah.
For no apparent reason.
Yeah,
just
different
currents. And you're like going, hey, I had everybody go to the bottom, but yet now we're 5, 6, 7 feet off the bottom.
Right.
Okay, everybody, strip out some line. So as a tool for me to stay down there right in the fish, right in their face, I have a lot more information and I have a lot more control. And I'm a lot calmer because basically I'll call it fishing by braille. That's the way I've fished for years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You tap bottom.
Find the bottom.
Yep.
Find the bottom, give it a crank, put it in the rod holder. Okay, now we're watching our rods, because we don't want to get stuck. We don't want to get snagged on the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
So we're looking, hey, everybody, but I still, working with the folks on my boat, I still go, hey, we still need to watch our rod tips. We're not just going to rely on LiveScope.
Right.
You need to understand that because when you get out on your boat and you don't have LiveScope, you need to know what it looks like when you're dragging.
Yeah. I mean, if everybody that went out with you ended up getting LiveScope, I think Garmin should be kicking you something for free because that would be huge. But you got to know, it's awesome having that in front of them, and then you can say, okay, this is what's happening, what you're feeling when you don't have LiveScope in front of you. So that's an awesome idea.
Yeah, and then the third piece, which is really critical, is if there's a snag. And I see that on LiveScope. LiveScope it's in forward mode, which for trolling we reverse it, and we're actually looking out of the back of the boat. But the 135-degree cone angle allows it to look in front of the scope.
Gotcha.
And depending on your depth, like if I'm in 20 feet of water, it might look 10 or 12 feet in front of the scope.
Okay.
So now if I see a snag, I've got 10 feet in front, or 10 or 12 feet in front of the scope where a snag is coming through, and then my gear is again back another 20 feet depending on how much line we have out and how much lead I'm using at a 45-degree angle. So I can say, hey, everybody, give it 3 cranks and we can get up over that snag, and that's a quite comforting thing. And so LiveScope has a lot of utility in my eyes for a guide for an individual, because we don't know generally what's going on down there. We put our gear down on the bottom, we're dragging it, and we come up one crank, and then when it starts to drag and the rod tip is shuddering, we like, hey, give that a crank real quick. This is Willamette River. It's snaggy.
Oh yeah,
potentially snaggy.
Yeah.
So God, what a great tool, and you're gonna really love it.
I'm excited. I am so excited.
Yeah.
Do you have your transducer mounted off the bow or off the stern?
So mine is off the stern.
Okay. Yeah.
And again, Daryl from Fish DR gave me the recipe of how to that hook up. He actually came over and helped my friend Shinya install it for me. And my buddy Shinya does all my electronics, and guy is just brilliant with
awesome.
With everything, electronics, remodeling, building, and I couldn't be more blessed to have a best friend. help me with all that stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, Shinya's doing the installation portion, and Daryl came over and guided us on how it should be installed.
Right.
And mine is absolutely bulletproof. It's like,
That's awesome.
yeah, I mean,
That is so awesome.
yeah. So I'm real excited to use that and learn more over the next year, I'm sure. And a lot of the trolling I'm doing is with the current right now.
Yeah.
So nosing into the current, you're going to see a lot more fish come up and investigate your gear because you're sitting in one spot.
Yeah.
If you're trolling downhill, you will see fish come in and investigate your gear as you're going by them, but they have to turn and follow.
Right.
So, and in my case, I'm doing a lot of guided education, so I'm talking to my customers. I can't glue my eyes to that. I can't look at every second. And yesterday out on Dan's boat, I was able to do that because I wasn't driving.
Right.
So, all around, that was really cool of Dan to take me out and share that with me and get to see a fish swimming in your gear and actually take you down. That was so awesome.
Yeah. That is super cool, man. One question that, and I'm actually going to backtrack to a little bit earlier in the episode because I completely skipped over it, is we were talking about your guided education trips and we kind of dove into what those look like. I'm kind of curious as to how does a guided education trip differ from going and paying a guide to take you fishing, which you offer those trips as well.
Correct.
What does the difference in those kind of look like?
Yeah, the guided education, basically I'll call, contact, interview, and ask, hey, where are you at in fishing? What are your struggles, if there are struggles? What do you want to learn? And what's your location of preference?
Right.
And then I'll build the trip around their needs.
Gotcha.
So, it may be that somebody doesn't even know how to tie knots. So I'm going to say, hey, or they may want to know what rods and reels to have.
Yeah.
And so some of that I'll do on the phone, but some of that I'll show when we get on the boat. Hey, get your phone out, videotape this. This is how you should be rigging.
Yeah.
And then, a normal guided trip is going to be, hey, I'm going to take people out. We're going to go grind an area that hopefully has fish, and we're going to find those fish. So the guided education trip might cover more areas. It might be that I move faster through areas than if I know there's a zone, and if we fish there long enough, we grind it out. Eventually, fish are going to come through, and we expect to get bit. Guided education might be we work an area for a short period of time, we go down to the next zone and maybe the next zone. And that gives them the ability to understand the patterns, understand where it might be snaggy, where you might get yourself in trouble, and how to fish a few zones so that they're not just like, hey, I just know this one place now. So that makes it harder to catch fish because I'm moving around a little more, but it's educating people so that they can come back and have more than one option.
Gotcha. So out of curiosity, what does the price difference look like for a guided education trip versus a guided trip?
So this year they are exactly the same.
Okay. Gotcha. So, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it really, you're getting the best of both worlds. And if you want to go on a guided education trip and you just like, hey, we really, really want to get a fish out of this trip, then we might just stay in one zone. We might not hover too far away from where I think fish are going to be.
Right. Gotcha.
So it is kind of the best of both worlds. And I think no matter what, when I get on the boat and I do a lot of talking, I'm always talking in terms of education. So a lot of that's going to be transferred just in a normal guided trip anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to think that, like I said earlier, that because somebody's on my boat, they're a rookie and, oh yeah, they're out with David Pyle because they don't know what the hell they're doing.
Right.
No, that's not the case. I have people who are really well-established fishermen. It's a little bit intimidating for me sometimes, As a matter of fact, I'm taking a guide out here in a couple of weeks, and he would like to learn the Willamette River.
Right.
But he's very accomplished and guides in his own zone. Mm-hmm. And so, sometimes I'm a little bit intimidated, like, oh my God, So I work with people at all different levels.
Right.
It's great.
Right. Man, that is super cool.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to get down towards the tail end of this here. We're sitting at 57 minutes.
Man, time flies. I can talk. I'm telling you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So take a second. I want you to tell people how they can get a hold of you for these trips. Obviously, everybody, or not everybody knows. A lot of people know YouTube, Fishing with David Pyle. Go subscribe to him. He's awesome. I've been watching his stuff for years. But anyways, yeah, how can people get a hold of you for these guided education trips, for these guided trips?
Okay. So I have a website, fishingwithdavidpyle.com, and you can go to my website and you can go to the guiding section, and my phone number's there so that I can be contacted, text me, telephone me, or whatever. That's the best way to get a hold of me. Just go to my website and get my contact information.
Gotcha.
But even more important, what most people don't know is I have a website and I actually have maps on my website.
Oh, really? That's really cool.
And so when I do a video, I'll pinpoint a map.
Yeah.
And so if somebody were like going, hey, I want to go fish in this zone, they could theoretically go to my map and they can click on an icon and it will actually link them right to the YouTube video of what I caught at that spot. Right?
Oh, that is awesome.
So yeah, so I'm sharing a lot of really good information in addition to just what's the end of a video. But hey, here's where I caught a fish. You can go look at what day, what I was using on that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's some more utility out there on my website than advertised. Maybe a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is super cool, man. I really want to thank you for coming on the show, man. It's been an absolute blast. We covered a lot of topics in a short amount of time, and it was a really good time just chatting. I love just chatting. So
yeah, and our connection is just like crazy that somehow we looped back and got in touch with each other. And I just want to say I'm thankful to so many people, whether it be Underdog or Mikey or my other friends Tony and Ken and my buddy Shinya, Dan, people who have gone on guided education trips with me, who continue to feed back information to me. And they're learning, they're passing some of that learning back to me. So I kind of feel like my center little universe is just a crazy big network.
Yeah.
And so I'm really, really thankful to everybody that's helped me out in fishing. It's a great community for me.
Yeah, that is absolutely awesome, man. I think we're getting down here to the end of it. I want to thank each and every one of you so much for tuning in for another episode of the Wet Net Podcast. We're getting a little sappy here this last couple minutes. I think this is week 16, so we've been doing this just a touch over. What is that? 3 months? I'm not a good math guy. Touch over 3 months, and in the last handful of weeks, this has really started to gain some traction, and I never really even expected it to get this cool. So we've had a lot of super awesome guests. We have even more coming. So thank you guys so much for helping me grow this thing. Please share it out there with your friends. Give them thumbs up if you like it. Yeah, man, I don't know what else to say.
Hey, man, I hope you're successful, and I hope that you have the same reception to the social media community that I have, and I think you will, because you're doing a good thing.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, awesome. Well, thank you guys very much for tuning in for another episode of the Wet Net Podcast. You guys be safe. Go out, get some fish. Yeah, man. Tight lines. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much.